Is CJ Stroud already a top 10 dynasty quarterback? All that and more in this episode of the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast.
You are Locked On Dynasty Football, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Here are your hosts, Marcus Mosher and Kate Madjuk.
Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use promo code LockedOnNFL, all lowercase, for a first deposit match up to $100. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Kate Madjuk. Check her out on Twitter at Kate Madjuk. Check her out at Pro Football Focus. She does absolutely fantastic work over there. Kate, today we're talking about the rookie quarterbacks midway through the season. And I'm curious, before we get to the actual players, has your mind changed on any of these players yet?
I mean, I think we've got to talk about CJ Stroud as the biggest riser, as you teased in our opener here. I don't know. I can't think of anybody that probably projected that he would come out and be this efficient a passer to just be taking the league by storm. I mean, Marcus, not only is he just blowing it out of the water, among his fellow rookies, he's actually blowing it out of the water in comparison to most NFL starters. Almost 2,400 passing yards, ranked seventh among quarterbacks so far this season. 14 passing touchdowns, 2 interceptions. So he's been, relatively safe with the football, and we've seen even some of that like mobility, which you haven't historically seen a ton of rushing from CJ Stroud. We've seen him, show that ability to extend plays with his legs. I still think Anthony Richardson probably has to be QB1 in this class, but it's not as far a gap as I thought it would be, Marcus.
So you and I are going to actually differ a little bit on CJ Stroud here, which might surprise you some, because I have CJ Stroud ahead of Anthony Richardson in my dynasty rankings right now. I prefer Stroud over Richardson because, number one, health. We have no idea what Richardson's going to look like next year coming off shoulder surgery. You didn't get him basically at all during a rookie season, and we're seeing Stroud already put up really, really good numbers. He was the higher draft pick. He had the better college production. I know that Richardson's ceiling is a little bit high. Well, not a little bit. I think his ceiling is quite a bit higher. I just think the floor is so much higher for Stroud. I think he is locked and loaded as a top 10 dynasty QB. And in fact, you can start to convince me like Tua or CJ Stroud, who Tua is being drafted as QB8 right now. I might rather just have CJ Stroud because of the health.
I actually think you're probably right there. Just feels a little bit less risky long term.
Mm-hmm.
And if like he's playing this well with, Nico Collins and Tank Dell, like I don't know, like it just feels like there's still some untapped potential there. Say,
Well, it's a very young offense too. Like, I mean,
yes,
we love Tank Dell, but Tank Dell's a rookie. You would theoretically expect that Tank Dell would get better as his career goes on. Nico Collins is a very young receiver. Dameon Pierce is a young running back. The only guy that's not super young in this offense is Dalton Schultz, but he's only like 27, 28 years old. I think there's a lot of room for growth in this entire offense, not just from Stroud.
Yeah, I think there's probably a lot of untapped potential there. Now, so you mentioned Tua as sort of a line drawn for you. What other quarterbacks in a similar range would you prefer Stroud over at this point?
So right now on Dynasty League football, you've got Justin Herbert at QB4, Lamar at QB5, Joe Burrow at QB6. To me, that's a tier gap, or that's a tier. All those guys pretty easily over CJ Stroud. Anthony Richardson, I already said that I'd take CJ Stroud over him. Trevor Lawrence, I would rather have Trevor Lawrence than CJ Stroud. Tua, I would rather have Stroud. And then it gets interesting. Justin Fields, Kyler Murray, Dak Prescott. I think I just like Stroud the best of all those guys.
He might have the safest floor as a passer. Now, Kyler Murray is one of these kind of wild cards. Like
Yes.
you look at his dynasty value, it feels very much tied to the fact that he tore his ACL, and now it's kind of opened this window for the Cardinals to potentially move on. You also don't have that same sort of like locked and loaded guarantee with Justin Fields. They feel like a team that could also move on from the quarterback, from their starting quarterback. So
Safer than
this
Justin
feels
Fields.
like the area of dynasty rankings where like there are enough question marks that CJ Stroud feeling like the certified guy for Houston, knowing this untapped potential at offense, I think it's a very fair argument to have CJ Stroud ahead of these guys.
Of all the guys that you mentioned, the one for me that I'm probably the most willing to say that I would take over Stroud is Kyler, because Kyler's back to being healthy. He's been a Pro Bowl quarterback before. Even if the Cardinals move on this year, and let's say they draft Caleb Williams, for example, Kyler's going to get plenty of shots in the NFL. Like, there's just no way that Kyler goes from being the starting quarterback from the Cardinals to being a backup quarterback anywhere else. So he is the one guy that I could see I could see it like in 3 weeks from now being like, hey, Kyler Murray back to being a top 8 dynasty quarterback if he plays well, because of the rushing upside, because of what we've seen before from him.
Yeah, I think that's very fair. The rushing upside's just too great to not have that as a big consideration in terms of his fantasy upside. Interesting though. I did not expect. I think I liked CJ Stroud a fair bit. Coming out, I actually had CJ Stroud ahead of Anthony Richardson in my rankings, which is hilarious now that we've sort of flip-flopped here. I think, overall it really just lies with the upside. And I think, I mean, we saw it, right? In very limited game action, Anthony Richardson was top end quarterback based on that rushing production. But
It's just the health, man. That's all it is. Like, you already are missing one of his most valuable years on a rookie contract. And it's like, I always get nervous with guys having major shoulder injuries.
I mean, that is fair. I hear the shoulder is attached to the arm, which is attached to the football. So
Yes.
that is a very legitimate concern. And we can talk about it in the next segment a little bit. Like, this isn't Anthony Richardson's first injury.
No.
He's been banged up in the past. How much, like, if it quacks like a duck, I don't like to use the word injury prone, but maybe there is something here, to Anthony Richardson's health.
I will say, for me, Stroud and Richardson are in a tier of their own for the rookie quarterbacks. But it gets really interesting after those top two as who you prefer as QB3. Let's get to that next. This episode is brought to you by DoorDash. Did the game go to timeout? Time to order in with DoorDash. Is it halftime? That is ordering in time. 2-minute warning. You got it. That is your cue to order in. Whenever the game clock stops, that's your time to order in with DoorDash. Why root for your favorite team on an empty stomach? Order on DoorDash and save on your football watch party favorites. I got to say, I'm really excited because my little hometown of Corey is getting a Domino's. And DoorDash is available on Domino's. It's going to be so much fun to order pizza for them during the season. Kate, I know you've got so many great places out there in Houston that you DoorDash from. Get prepared before game day even gets there. Stock up on your favorite appetizers and order all of your tailgate gear on DoorDash. Then get ready to watch your team win. Get 50% off up to a $10 value when you spend $15 or more on your first order when you download the DoorDash app and enter promo code LOCK23, subject to change, terms apply. Again, that is 50% off up to a $10 value when you spend $15 or more on your first order when you download the DoorDash app and enter promo code LOCK23, subject to change, terms apply. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. We're kicking up our coverage here on Locked On as Locked On NFL Kickoff Live is going live every Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern on every Locked On NFL YouTube channel. Hosts Tanisha Batiste, Jarvis Davis, and Kyle Krabs will break down every game on the NFL slate to get you ready for your team's matchups, your fantasy lineups, your betting angles, and so much more. Plus, get the in-depth local analysis from our stable of NFL hosts across the country who know these teams better than anyone else. Find Locked On NFL Kickoff live every Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern on any Locked On NFL YouTube channel. All right, Kate, let's have a little debate here. So, Richardson, Young, QB1, QB2, depending on your order. We're lockstep there. Who is your QB3 midway through these guys' rookie seasons?
It's Will Levis.
I knew this was coming. I knew it.
I don't know if it's polarizing, Marcus. I have always just had this I don't know, something in my heart for Will Levis. I don't know if it's the mayo in the coffee or what it might be about Will Levis, but I think it originates with the arm talent, which allows him to effectively deliver mayo-filled coffee into his mouth. Will Levis, he's just got so much arm talent. He's got so much arm strength. And I think there's so much untapped potential there that we saw a little bit of in his debut as a rookie. Now, it might feel silly to say this coming off a disappointing outing against the Steelers, but the Steelers are a relatively tough defensive matchup, right? They're good at forcing turnovers. They're a bend don't break unit. And Will Levis, like he's got a little bit of size to him, 6'3", 231 pounds, a little bit of a sneaky asset in the end zone. Like this is a guy that, I think has a lot of potential to convert as a rusher, a la Josh Allen. Maybe not the same, kind of mobility and athleticism as Josh Allen, but he's got a little bit of burst for him. He's a 10'4" broad jump, 34-inch vertical, like that. Not all that terrible for the quarterback position. I think just the arm talent, the upside, if he can rein in some of those qualities, like the inaccuracy, which was the biggest problem coming out of college for Will Levis. If he can rein that in a little bit and figure out how to use his arm strength with a little bit of that touch that we see from C.J. Stroud, I think he's easily a high upside prospect. Am I crazy?
You're not crazy. There's a lot to like about Will Levis, and to be honest, I actually came away encouraged from Will Levis after that Thursday game against Pittsburgh. As you know, I was not rooting for the Steelers. Levis had a horrific offensive line. He got pressured like 38 times in this game. They had 4 different injuries. Treylon Burks left the game with an injury. And still, he was able to get this team moving the ball up and down the field. There was a point in the game where Tennessee had the ball at like the 1 yard line late in the fourth quarter. You got the Heinz Field playing the Renegade song, right? And you thought for sure, like, okay, here comes the back-breaking interception. And what did he do? He threw the ball right over the middle of the field for a first down. I think he's got something. I do like Will Levis. I've been very encouraged by what I've seen from the first 2 games, Kate. But I'm still taking Bryce Young over. Listen,
wow.
This could go very poorly for me because we are recording this like 4 hours before the Thursday night football game between the Bears and the Panthers. There is just a chance that he looks absolutely awful.
This could go sour very quickly.
Very quickly. This is going to be like the coldest take, the fastest, coldest take we've ever seen. It's just that Carolina has invested so much into him. He was a number 1 pick for a reason. They haven't had a good offensive line. The receivers are dreadful outside of Adam Thielen. I want to be patient here with Bryce Young. Give him time. Give the Panthers some time to build the right offense around him. I'm still taking Bryce over our guy Will.
The question is, like, how much did we see them sort of set back their offense with the amount of draft capital, etc., that they gave up to get him? And I think that's my biggest question with this team is, can you trust that they're going to be able to get this together? And can you trust that this is going to be a viable matchup? Like, where are they going to get him weapons? And that's my biggest problem with Bryce Young. It's not even necessarily Bryce Young. It's questions about where is this offense headed?
So they're going to have to either do one of 2 things: continue to trade away future assets to get a receiver, which I don't think they want to do because they're already on the hooks for a first-round pick in 2024 and 2025, or just you're going to have to massively overpay in free agency. And I think that's what's going to happen, whether maybe it's T. Higgins. Maybe they have to go out because of the situation they're in and make T. Higgins the highest paid wide receiver in NFL history. Give him $33 million a year. I know he's not worth that, but you've got to get Bryce Young some help. I just want to at least see one full off season before I panic on Bryce Young, because again, the Panthers have invested so much. I love what I saw from him in college. I just want to see it.
I think that's fair. My question mark lies with what is the upside of Bryce Young for fantasy? And I think
CJ Stroud?
that's absolute best case scenario. But I think that CJ Stroud has much better weapons than Bryce Young.
Oh, there's no doubt. He's definitely going to have to be a pocket passing quarterback, right? He's not going to make plays with his legs. So you're right. Like, the ceiling is relatively low. That's why I'm not going out and trading for Bryce Young right now. But I have Bryce Young in multiple dynasty leagues. I'm also just not selling for 60 cents on the dollar right now. I'd rather just hang out and see what happens over the next year and a half.
I don't know. This is where we disagree, and that's okay. I support you regardless, but I just think that Will Levis has such higher upside.
Just to show how far apart these guys were going into the month of August, according to Dynasty League Football, in super flex leagues, Bryce Young had an ADP of 37 overall, QB 16. Will Levis, 136, QB 31. But now we don't have the updated November ADP. I got to imagine that gap is pretty close, if there's even a gap at all.
Yeah, and I mean, you look at Bryce Young. Obviously, he's got the draft capital, but Will Levis, like beginning of the second round, he's not. That's still significant enough. We can't just write him off.
It's not like a third round pick like they spent on Malik Willis, which was at the middle end.
Like, this was got a little bit more invested. It was this close. It was a hair away from being a first round pick. I think from an arm talent perspective, there's no doubt in my mind that Bryce Young is the better football player. There's no doubt in my mind that Bryce Young, if surrounded by the right weapons, has the potential for a much longer career in the NFL with a lot less volatility. But in terms of fantasy, I'm always chasing that upside at the quarterback position. That's Levis for me.
All right, so we talked about CJ Stroud. We talked about Anthony Richardson. We got Bryce Young and Will Levis out. Is there any other rookie quarterback that you are interested in at all? Kate, we will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by Jase Medical. I just learned that you can get a 1-year supply of ED medications through Jase Medical. Do you realize that means you can bring on your extended travel? If there's a supply chain issue, you are covered, my friend. You don't have to worry about whether or not you can refill your generics for Cialis or Viagra. And this is possible because of our friends at Jase Medical. Go online right now at jasemedical.com to receive your 12-month supply on your daily medications. Remember to use promo code LOCKEDON at checkout for a discount as well. A verified customer had this to say about Jase. I am thankful for this service. Supply chain issues caused me to cut pills in half just to have them. I ordered most of my daily meds with a year supply. I also ordered an antibiotic kit. I feel secure now. Prices are lower than my local pharmacies. I highly recommend this for everyone. If you or someone you love would love to get some of that peace of mind by having a year supply of any daily med, go to jasemedical.com to see if it's offered for you. Remember to use promo code LOCKEDON for $20 off your purchase. All right, Kate, rounding out this quarterback discussion for these rookies here. We've actually seen quite a few other rookie quarterbacks play this year between Aiden O'Connell out with the Las Vegas Raiders. We saw Dorian Thompson-Robinson get a start for the Browns. We saw Tyson Bagent play a couple different games for the Bears. He's also going to start tonight against the Panthers. Jaron Hall started for the Vikings. Did any of these other quarterbacks do anything for you, including Hendon Hooker, who has yet to play for the Lions?
if I'm going to take a total dart throw, and this is like the dartiest of dart throws, I'm like, feel free to tell me I'm a total idiot. What about Jaron Hall, who knocked out of last week's game, literally with a concussion? Unfortunately, it was his first career start, but I think looked, relatively solid. This is an offense with some really talented weapons at wide receiver and tight end. You've got Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson. Like, this is a offense built to support the pass. Jaron Hall, I thought, looked pretty decent in a very limited
Yeah.
sample size. He is one of these athletic quarterbacks that, has the ability to, extend and make plays with his legs. The mobility, those are things that I think are kind of hard to find, and they can translate to fantasy production. So, like, you have Kirk Cousins set to be a free agent. There's no bodies there in Minnesota that are really gonna make any
Yeah.
sort of difference. They're not gonna be contending for one of these top quarterbacks if things continue with their ups and downs. Do they just, throw Jaron Hall at and see what happens, and, see
It
if they
does
can develop him with these weapons?
It does feel like Jaron Hall is going to have a great chance to be the number 2 quarterback next year, regardless if Cousins comes back or they draft somebody. So I don't mind that one at all. I think in a vacuum, I like DTR the best, but the problem
Mhm.
is of all these quarterbacks that we mentioned, he probably has the most stable quarterback situation ahead of him, right? As
Yeah.
unstable as Deshaun Watson has been, he's not going anywhere with this guaranteed contract. Like, the Browns have to figure out a way to make this work, which leads me to Aiden O'Connell, who the
Ooh.
Raiders love. One of the things was they asked a couple of people on the staff who was the best quarterback before Josh McDaniels got fired, and like the consensus among the coaches was it's Aiden O'Connell. And now we saw him play against the Giants. They scored 30 points for the first time this season. He looked really good in the preseason. I kind of think O'Connell has a great chance to be like a 4 or 5 year starter. The upside's low. So what are you getting here? Probably like a Jimmy Garoppolo in his prime. But I do think he, of these guys, probably has the best chance of being a long-term starter.
I I think that's fair. Yeah.
It's just not exciting at all, right? Like, if you have Aiden O'Connell, like, you're hoping for 240 yards and 2 touchdowns every week. Like, that's probably your ceiling.
It's one of those things that from a real life on the football field perspective could work out. If the people in that building really like Aiden O'Connell, and you kind of brought up this argument way back in the day when we were arguing about Kenny Pickett, and you're like, well, the Steelers really love him, and he's going to get chances, and that inherently, that sort of loyalty when you find a guy that you really like as a franchise, um, sometimes just that availability for that team who really likes prospect XYZ, sometimes that wins out.
Well, a perfect example is Desmond Ridder had better stats across the board than Kenny Pickett, higher yards per attempt, a higher passer rating. He gave you way more rushing upside, already benched in Atlanta, right? And he wasn't, just to be clear, I don't think he was good enough for what Atlanta wanted, but he's already benched. The
Yeah.
Steelers, if you listen to Mike Tomlin just talk this week about Kenny Pickett, loves Kenny Pickett. And it really sounds like they want to see this thing through, not just this year, but like for the next 3 or 4 years. So there is some stability.
Woo!
Like, if the front office and the coaching staff likes you, that is valuable from a dynasty perspective.
Yeah, it just gives you a little bit of stability. When you look at some of these other offenses that have those question marks, it is nice when you have a quarterback that doesn't have as many of those. And it does seem like the door is open there for the Raiders.
All right, that is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Dynasty your first listen every day. Every day. On tomorrow's show, we're going to talk about the end of Bryce Young's career, I'm sure, after I praised him so much earlier in the show. Now we'll break down Panthers-Bears, a game that you won't watch. We will watch it for you. So make sure you tune in for that. Go check out the show on YouTube. We post shows every single day over there. We are free and available on all platforms. Check out Kate on Twitter at Kate Majuk. Make sure you check out her work at Pro Football Focus. She does an absolutely amazing job I'm at Marcus_Mosher. Enjoy the game, and we'll see you right back here tomorrow.